Hello everybody, and welcome to Sports Source, your number one source of sports. And today we're talking about the Golden State Warriors are title contenders for the 2019-2020 NBA season. But before we do that, smash that like button and subscribe for more NBA news and discussions. Without further ado, let's begin the video. So the Warriors had a very busy offseason. They lost Kevin Durant, who's a top 5 player in the NBA. They lost DeMarcus Cousins, who even though he wasn't the DeMarcus Cousins he used to be, he was still pretty vital to that team. They lost Iguodala, who's a finals MVP. He was just a very good player for them. And they also lost Jordan Bell and Quinn Cook, who were some nice supporting bench pieces. But, with all this turnaround, they also did get back Willie Cauley-Stein, who's going to be their starting center. They got D'Lo, DeAngelo Russell. They got Alec Burks, Glenn Robinson III, and they also got Amari Spellman. So this team has gone through a lot of changes, but we're just gonna talk about if they are still title contenders in the West. And the reason I bring this question up is, yes, they do have Curry, who I think that can play to his MVP self that he was back in 2014-15, and they also got DeAngelo Russell, who was an all-star last year. They have Draymond Green, and Klay Thompson is going to be out, but he's only going to be out until January, and then he's going to slide back in at that small forward position. So we're going to have to see how that all goes. But the Warriors, they always find a way. They're the Golden State Warriors, and they still have the roster, they still have the core 3 that they have when they went 73-9. They're going to have Klay back this season, but if I'm them, I don't really want to rush him into it, because with this team, you could surprise a lot of people and make the playoffs. You don't want to play him too much heavy minutes, because you still have D'Lo, Curry, and Draymond, and all these big men who I think are good enough for you. But Klay, obviously he's an amazing player, but coming back from that injury, you kind of want to shelter him a little bit, keep him ready for the playoffs so that you could go on a big playoff run. But also, the West got way better, and it's going to be hard to compete in the West, especially with teams at the top like the Clippers, the Jazz, the Nuggets, the Lakers, and the Rockets, who I think are all better than the Golden State Warriors. And then, after that's the Portland Trailblazers, who always find a way to make the playoffs. You got the San Antonio Spurs, who always find a way to make the playoffs. But the Warriors, I think, are in that middle ground between the top teams in the West and the playoff fringe teams in the West. So I think that this team must stay healthy for them to actually compete. They already lost Klay, which is a bigger blow than Kevin Durant, because most of us knew that Kevin Durant was going to leave. But, it's Klay that I think hurts the most with that injury. They did get D'Lo to replace him, and we're going to talk about D'Lo in a bit and how I think he's going to be a big X factor on this team. But Curry and D'Lo, they just got to come out and play amazing, because they're really the only scorers on this team. Draymond not score, Willie Cauley-Stein not score. And their bench players aren't going to be scorers either. They're just going to, try to support those 2 main guys. So there's a lot of pressure on Curry and D'Lo and Draymond. And Curry, he's had that ankle history. D'Lo hasn't had much of an injury history. He got one big injury with the Nets, but I don't really think that there's a nagging injury there. And then you got Draymond Green, who isn't really injury prone, but he does need to stay in shape for this upcoming season. And we're going to talk about Draymond right now, because Draymond is a big X factor on this team. We've seen what he did in the playoffs last season. We know what he can do. But he just needs to stay consistent, because in the regular season last year, he was not very consistent because he didn't need to be. He wasn't really trying to his full efforts. He wasn't in shape, and he didn't really need to try that hard for that team, because they were already going to be title contenders, because they had, guys like Curry, they had guys like Klay, they had Durant, and they also had DeMarcus Cousins. But now that they are all gone, and now that Draymond, there's a lot more pressure on him, I think that he's going to go back to his defensive player of the year self. The more athletic Draymond, he's going to hit more threes like we've seen before. I think he's just going to try harder in the regular season, stay more in shape, and be that defensive monster that we all know he can be. Moving on to another big X factor on this team, I have DeAngelo Russell. Now with Klay gone, the lack of shooting is really starting to show with that starting lineup. You got Draymond, who's not a good 3-point shooter, but we'll have to see what he does this season. And then you got lots of big men, and only one of them can shoot, and that's Jonas Jerebko. But you also have that lacking small forward position. Alfonso McKinney is going to be their starting small forward unless they address that need. But D'Lo, I think, is a really good signing for them. And I'm glad they got D'Lo out of that Kevin Durant sign-in trade, because DeAngelo Russell is just such an amazing player. He was an all-star last year. In my opinion, he's a top 30 player in the NBA. He's a great 3-point shooter. He can handle the ball, and he could take pressure off of Curry with handling the ball and with off the ball, because DeAngelo Russell, we haven't really seen him in that off-ball role, and I think that's going to be one of the big keys to this season, how well DeAngelo Russell can fit in is going to determine their whole season. Because think of it this way, if DeAngelo Russell is integrated into the offense right away, he's getting his shots, and, you know, he's playing good, then I think that this team can go farther. But if D'Lo isn't fitting in right away, and they struggle right off the bat, that's not going to be good news for them. But I think that DeAngelo Russell, and he could just fit in with this Golden State Warriors team against Steph Curry, because Steph Curry is just such an unselfish player. And even though that there's not much help around him this season, I still want him to continue to be unselfish, because yeah, we've seen him score like he did in his MVP seasons, and I think that he can continue to do that, and he can still, you know, pass it to DeAngelo Russell and give him some shining moments. And, you know, we've seen Curry completely by himself against the Raptors for a little bit, and it wasn't good. They were pressuring him so much, you know, he was passing out, but, you know, they weren't giving him any room to shoot. They weren't giving him any shots, which was good on the Raptors defense part. But if you don't have that guy like DeAngelo Russell, that guy that can shoot, that guy that can also handle the ball, because you want Curry to play a little bit more off ball, I feel like, and give DeAngelo Russell some more space to do what he's been doing in Brooklyn. But yeah, if you trap Curry and there's no shooters around him, then it's bad news. But you got D'Lo, a guy that could take off that pressure, which is very, very good for them. Now we're just going to run down through the roster and see what I think this roster could do. Obviously, Steph Curry, I believe that he's going to have an MVP caliber season, and I think that lots of people do have him as the MVP, but I don't think that he's going to be the MVP just because their seeding won't be high enough. If you look at my predictions video for the standings of this upcoming season, I think I put the Warriors at number 6, which isn't trying to it was 6 or 7. I'm not trying to disrespect the Warriors. It's just that the West is so stacked at the top, and they just don't have the depth to get it done. That's my big thing. But Steph Curry, obviously an amazing player, best point guard in the league, best shooter of all time, whatever. We know what Curry can do. Backup PG, you got Sean Livingston. He's a vet, good mid-range shooter, good playmaker, good defender. You know, you want to have him there, but there's not a very good, reliable backup point guard for them, unless you want to play D'Lo at that point guard sometimes. You know, you want to really use Curry wisely, because you don't want to overplay him and then he gets injured or stuff like that. You know, you want to try to balance it out, and I have faith in the coach Steve Kerr that he can, you know, figure it out. You know, I know that there's lots of memes about Steve Kerr isn't a good coach and that the Warriors coach themselves, but I think that this is going to prove to fans, if he does good, this is going to prove to fans how good of a coach he actually is and how he can handle this Warriors offense and bring them back to the top. Moving on to the shooting guard position, I've talked a lot about DeAngelo Russell. He's one of my favorite players in the NBA, and I think that he can do very, very well for this team. You got Alec Burks, who they signed, who's going to be a good shooter, good guy that, you know, you need shooting around this Warriors team, because with their big man and their other positions, there's not a lot of shooting. So I think Alec Burks will play a pretty big role on this team. They have Jordan Poole, who they drafted, which he may play a little bit more minutes than expected, because, you know, there's not a lot of depth. I mean, there is a lot of depth for the big man, but we'll get back to that in a little bit. But there's not a lot of guard depth, and Jordan Poole is a guy that can just go out there, take a couple shots, and, you know, shoot a lot of threes. And then you also got Glenn Robinson, who they also signed. It was a good signing. He's not going to get a lot of minutes, but I think that he could be efficient in his minutes. He could just catch and shoot. He could play good defense. He could drive to the rim. You know, that's his job. He knows their job. And also, back to the depth. The depth on this team isn't very good at all, but I think that another big difference maker for this team will be their depth. If their depth, because, you know, most of these guys are pretty unproven, but if these guys come out and prove themselves, I think they could carry this team that much farther. And at the small forward position, we've already talked how Klay is going to be at that small forward position when he comes back, but he's injured till January, so what do they do until then? Well, they're probably going to start Alfonso McKinney, who hasn't really proved himself, but he's still young enough. He still, I think, can be decent for them. And I think that Curry's just that guy that can elevate everyone around him, and if he can elevate Alfonso McKinney, I mean, that could be good for them. But we've seen the Warriors, we've seen them take these guys that aren't really big names and turn them into good players. I think that that's what Curry could do with Alfonso McKinney. And then when he comes back, he can just slide back over to that backup small forward position for them. Moving on to the power forward, this is when things get interesting. I've already talked about Draymond. If you look at my top 25 players in the NBA, he was there. And, you know, we already know about Draymond. We know what he can do. He's an amazing key part of that team. And if they want to do good this season, he needs to do all the things I said. He needs to go back to his old Draymond, shoot better, play better defensively, be more athletic, you know, things like that. But at the backup power forward position, you also got Jonas Jerebko, who's a very good floor spacer. I think he's going to have a big year because again, you need shooting on this team. He's a stretch four, and he could do very well for them. They also got Amari Spellman, who was on the Atlanta Hawks, but some people compared him to Draymond, and I think that he can kind of mentor him. I think that Amari Spellman could just be a good reserve for them upcoming season. Then moving on to the center position, you got Willie Cauley-Stein, who is very underrated for the Sacramento Kings. I think he averaged like 15 points last year, and he just gets some good rebounds. He scores in the post. He was a high overall draft pick, and he is a bust, but nonetheless, he's going to be the starting center for them. I want to see him prove himself, and I think that was a very good signing to give them more, depth with their big man. They also got Kevon Looney, who I'm a very big fan of. I think he's going to be an amazing backup center for them, so I'm excited to see that. And then you got Andrew Bogut, who's a vet. He's a good third string center that they could have. So they have lots of third string big men, but the guard and wing depth is very lacking for this team, which is kind of concerning if they want to contend for the championship this upcoming NBA season. Thank you all for watching. What do you think of this Warriors roster? Do you think that they could be title contenders for the upcoming NBA season? Let me know down in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe to join Sports Source Nation and to never miss an upload. That's all for me now. I'll see you in the next one. Take care and goodbye.